another edition of Blackfive TV. Here today with author Travis Taylor, author, researcher, engineer, and not to say author, but even best-selling author. Travis, how are you today?
I'm all right. How are you, Blake?
I'm not going to complain. Some of our readers may not know you that well, so if you'd be so kind, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, my name's Travis Taylor. A lot of my books say Travis S. Taylor because that's my middle initial. And then I did that actually because there's a NFL cornerback actually, I think he is, played for the Ravens for a while, named Travis Taylor. And so I decided, well, I wanted to at least have some delineation so when people look me up on Google that they would know the difference between an NFL player versus a science fiction writer, right? I'm from North Alabama. I was born in Decatur, Alabama in 1968. Interesting is I was born on July the 24th. So on my first birthday, what we did to celebrate that was land on the moon. And I told Neil Armstrong the one time that I met him that I appreciated him doing that for me. That was that one. Or actually, and it's an interesting story with that. I actually signed an autograph for him at a convention a couple of years ago. I didn't know I was signing it for him at the time, and then one of his handlers took the book and handed it to him, and I realized it was Neil Armstrong. And I told my wife, and she's like, "Well, did you get his autograph?" And of course, I didn't. I was such a deer in headlights, you know. But anyway, I'm a Southern boy. Grew up in North Alabama here, like I said. Then I always was interested in science and engineering and science fiction. You can't live near the rocket city, Huntsville, Alabama, where we built the rockets and went to the moon without being in that kind of at least having that kind of mindset as a kid. When I was young, they would test the solid rocket booster engines and the Space Shuttle main engine parts across the river at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and we could hear them go off. It meant my older brother would climb this big pine tree we had, and he'd go way up to the top of it with binoculars to try and look across and see the smoke plumes coming up from Thiokol Pond is what they call it now. It probably has three-eyed fish and multi-headed things, and no telling what kind of rocket propellants leaked into that pond. And then in high school, I stayed really active in science and engineering. That's what I wanted to be. Actually, back up just a little, in the third grade, all the third graders took this test to say what you wanted to be when you grew up. And mine said I either wanted to be an astronaut or a scientist. And that's exactly the approach that I took for the rest, from then on, from the third grade on. And I was going to do both. Now, I've come close to doing the astronaut thing, and I'm not giving up on that yet. We'll see. And then after high school, well, in high school I did a science project where I built a radio telescope that picked up radio signals from various things, actually black hole remnants and supernovas, and won a state science paper competition. It caught the eye of the Army, and the U.S. Army offered me a job to come work for them, work on directed energy weapon systems and other advanced concepts, and they'd pay my way through school. So I did that. I did what you call a cooperative education program. We call them co-ops. Go to school half-time, go to work half-time. So I did that at Auburn University, War Eagle, and went there, got a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, came home back to Huntsville to work full-time for the Army while going part-time to graduate school, got a first a master's degree in physics, then a PhD in optical science and engineering, and then I went back and got a master's degree in aerospace engineering, and then I registered for one of the first accredited online astronomy degrees at the University of Western Sydney in Australia, and I got a master's degree in astronomy. And that was actually intriguing. A lot of science fiction enthusiasts are interested about what I did for my master's in astronomy. I actually detected 2 extrasolar planets. That means I detected 2 Jupiter-sized, well, actually, they were bigger than Jupiter-sized planets around another star system. Yeah, that was kind of cool. And I did it with the observatory that I built in my backyard out here that I actually built the observatory as my master's research to show that you could use commercial off-the-shelf components that anybody could go buy from Meade or Celestron or some other telescope manufacturer, build it with put it all together with enough care, use modern computers. In fact, I use a real cheap Best Buy e-machine, paid like $200 on sale for it to do the data analysis. And using those commercial things, I proved that you could detect extrasolar planets. And now, since then, I wasn't the only one to do it. There were a lot of people doing it parallel at the same time I was. And since then, there have been like 300 or 400 planets found at this point. And as my day job, I've worked for various things. I started out with the U.S. Army Aviation and Missile Command in their Research Development Engineering Center. I then went into private industry for a while. I worked for NASA projects, space projects, the intelligence community. I worked for Department of Defense projects, SOCOM, you name it. If it's a 3-letter agency somewhere, I spent some time doing something for them. More recently, I worked on the flight test program for the Ares 1 launch vehicle. I was one of the principal investigators that designed that flight test program. And it's still going on. They'll do the first launch in less than a year or so. And hopefully that will be the rocket that we end up carrying on to the moon, back to the moon. And I recently, in 2007, went back to civil service as an Army employee working for the United States Space and Missile Defense Command. And there I'm sort of a scientist at large doing directed energy weapon research and development, doing other space concept development, and so on.
Okay. That's quite a background.
Oh, I don't know. People say that, but I always had in mind that I wanted to be an astronaut. And they'll say, well, you've got a PhD and 3 master's degrees. Well, go look up Story Musgrave's biography at some point. He has 6 master's degrees, and he's a test pilot, and he jumps out of airplanes at near space altitudes as high as you can, to test what the effects on the human body are. So, and that's just one of them. Most of the astronauts follow that type of criteria.
It's true. Well, growing up, how much military fiction or military science fiction did you read?
Well, growing up, I read a lot of Heinlein and Starship Troopers. That's the quintessential military science fiction book, right? And that's probably still my favorite book to date. Stranger in Strangeland isn't military science fiction, but it's probably up there close to being one of my favorites. And then in high school, man, I got really into Robotech. I know a lot of folks are into Robotech in that era. I was, I think, either a junior or a senior in high school when the Robotech phenomena hit the United States. And then right as I graduated from high school, the novels came out by Jack McKinney, which turns out to be 2 other people as a pseudonym for two folks. And I read those things and reread them, and they're up here on my bookshelf here in my library, all 20-something books, and the spines are worn out because I've read them a lot. I really like the naval pilot aspect of that they put into space, combat and so on. And I really try to recapture that and rekindle that in my latest series that I've worked on, the One Day on Mars, Tau Ceti Agenda books. In fact, it has transfigurable mecha, like in the Robotech series, and it has powered armor, like in Starship Troopers. So, trying to tie in all the best things, the best of both worlds. There's big super carrier battles and so on. So, I really have had a lot of fun with that particular series, and doing similar things with the collaboration I've done with John Ringo, also in the Vorpal Blade Looking Glass series.
I was just going to say you do a bit of powered armor in that series too.
Oh yeah, in Into the Looking Glass and the Vorpal Blade, Max on Foe, soon to come out Claws That Catch. Actually, John and I have about 9 books in that series outlined. We just haven't got around to writing it all, because it is a real fun universe to write in. And we originally, the first book John wrote by himself, Into the Looking Glass, and it came out he started working on it right after he did the There Will Be Dragons series, and for the reasons I'm not exactly sure all of which, but I remember Jim Bain and David Drake telling John that they needed him to write another boots on the ground kind of book, and John wanted it to be a hard science book, and John isn't really a hard science writer. He's a mill SF guy. And so John calls me up, and he really pinged me a lot while writing Into the Looking Glass on the science stuff, and we spent a lot of time on the phone. Well, Into the Looking Glass was successful enough that John said, "Man, I'd like to do a series on this," and Jim Bain had told him, "You really ought to do a series in this." And John told Jim that that he didn't think he would be able to do the series justice by himself because it was going to require a lot of hard science to carry on. And he had used me so much, to help him out in the first one. He just asked me to co-author the series with him. And John and I, we have a really good relationship. We try to out-camp each other when we get together. When Von Neumann's War is a testament to that. We did that. That was our first collaboration. And it was actually my idea. I had the idea of wanting to write a book about von Neumann probes, but I wanted to have it boots on the ground against von Neumann probes. And so John and I got together over a few drinks, and of course John smoked about 5 cigars during the process. And we came up with the idea for the book and put it together. And we had to keep dialing ourselves back because we would get to where what we were trying to do is too crazy and too funny and too wacky and too campy that we would have to, no wait, that's getting too much. Nobody will believe that. And we did go so far as to make Hooters the headquarters of the resistance against the alien attack. And then when the attack started getting too close to the local military base, we had Hooters moved inside the military compound so we could protect it. So those are the kinds of things that John and I end up with, and we're having that much fun in the Vorpal Blade series. Taking a submarine and turning it into a starship is always, there's a lot of fun there. Space Marines, we'll go out with hundreds of Space Marines, come back with a couple. There's always a lot of fun. We're running out of people to kill though.